Welcome to Bet on the Web, an Ionic podcast. Join Matt Netko and Mike Hartington as they discuss a variety of topics through the lens of the open web. The core Ionic team you know and love, as well as industry experts, will join them in covering important industry trends, sharing thought leadership, and debating the newest technology shaping the web platform landscape.
Cool. All right. So, welcome everyone to the latest episode of the podcast. I am Mike Hartington. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Matt Netko.
Hey, everyone.
And we are also joined by a awesome guest, David Dal Busco. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, it's perfect. Hi, everyone.
David is a freelancer by day and a creator of project DeckDeckGo, and also the organizer of the Ionic Zurich meetup. So, David, why don't you just dive in a little bit? You do a lot in the community, and share some of your own insights and your own kind of backstory.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna try to keep that short then. No, but I worked a long time for companies because I've got an engineering degree, and 1 or 2 years ago, I was interested to try to create my own project, and I wanted to build a mobile app, and that's when I discovered Ionic, and then Angular, and then since then I kind of like to use that stack to develop stuff. And recently I also felt in love with web components and Stencil, I have to say. Because I had to do a presentation about web component, and so I had to dig deeper. And
yeah, I'm just curious. So if you're a freelancer by day, so do you typically work with web technologies, or is it a newer stack for you? Like, for example, I was more of a back-end developer before joining Ionic, so it's a whole new world that I've been only part of for a while.
So before that, I was working as a developer, and then I was also doing project management, business analysis. I did a bit of everything, and I began to be a freelancer in 6 months or something like that. And I was really lucky because I found contract where I build the whole platform, the whole application. So right now I've got 2 projects going on. The first one is, no, actually they are both mobile app where I use Ionic, and for both setup I use Angular. And then for the backend, for the first project for sure we use Firebase, and for the second one we most probably gonna use Firebase too. So yeah.
Nice. So it seems like that's kind of a typical stack setup for Ionic Apps, is to have the Ionic Angular front end part and then dive into Firebase on the back end. It just seems like it's such an easy solution versus having to wire everything up yourself. It's making apps and products on easy mode, more or less.
Yeah, and I really like. I always use Firestone, and I think that that offline support is really an asset because it just works.
Yeah,
well.
I worked on an app for a conference, and they were using Firestore for all their data storage, and I was thinking, oh, I'm gonna have to configure some local storage or set up service worker for this, but the fact that it's built in is just comes in handy quite a bit.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, it's really amazing. Like enabling the offline storage is maybe like one line of code where you say enable and then it works. But still, it's a bit a different mindset. Like for another project, I built my own backend, like with Express.js and MongoDB. And with Firestore, you still have that. I don't know, like you more gonna use observable, and the data gonna be fetched. Like the fact that you can go in the database, change something, and in real time the information is pushed to the users. It's kind of a different approach.
Yeah, I really like it, and it's It's not uncommon. A lot of people, at least in the community that I've seen, are big fans of all the benefits that you get from that. It just makes working with this data that could change anytime just like so much easier. Getting off topic a little bit, we could spend an entire episode just talking about Firebase, but we want to talk about some progressive web apps, web components in your project, DeckDeckGo. Why don't you tell us a little bit about DeckDeckGo?
So yeah, I had to do that presentation about web components, and I began to use a good tool to do my presentation, but then I just thought that I was not actually using what I was explaining, and that's how it all began. Like I thought, okay, then I could build my presentation with web components, and then from there it just went a bit insane. Had a lot of idea because presentation is something everyone did most probably once in their life. So everybody got a good idea, and then every time someone tell me a good idea about it, then I check if I can do that with web component, and yeah, I implement it. I like the fact that I like that web component approach, that you really write something which is super stable with the time. Like I recently updated one of my component after maybe 6 months, which I didn't did anything with it, and it took me like, I don't know, 1 minute to just update the last version of Stencil, and it was done. There was not like removing all the node modules, fetching a lot of data, doing some migration and stuff. No, it just, they are small, they respect they are made for the browser,
A couple of things I'm noticing right away that you touched on from why you did this that's, I think, really powerful and really awesome is, actually, especially coming from this technology realm, realizing that you're going to give a presentation or you need to present something, and actually building something that ended up being quite this little powerful app that you did. I mean, there's something really powerful about that. I think that's a great strategy in general because of, until you, it is one thing to, teach something, like read some articles, maybe read the documentation on, let's say, web components or Ionic, but to actually apply that knowledge to create something is really neat. And the other thing I was going to say is I'd go into your DeckDeckGo.com homepage is talk about applying the technology again. It's obvious from the get-go so this is a presentation builder and so much more, and we'll get into those details. But this is so cool that your the landing page is a DeckDeckGo presentation in and of itself. That's really awesome. That became apparent right away, and I'm like clicking through this. So bravo, that's awesome.
Thanks a lot. No, but I mean, it's just, I don't know if I wanted to. It's also, DeckDeckGo is also a learning tool to me. Like to keep myself pushing, learning new stuff, and so a lot of things I developed in DeckDeckGo are just things I didn't knew before. Like web component and Stencil, I wasn't that good, so I learned that. Or I had no idea of WebRTC, so I thought, yeah, okay, or could I apply that to that small project? And that's a bit the idea. And yeah, you were speaking about documentation and reading article, and I have to say, I think like the Stencil documentation, for me, I really like it. It's short, simple, but super effective. It just makes easy to begin because you can go to the documentation, there is a getting started, and then you just do chapter after chapter, and then like a couple of minutes after it, you have built your first component. It's just super easy. So
yeah, let's dig into that a little bit because I was curious. Are you using Ionic 4 components or a combination of building your own with Stencil and the Ionic framework 4, or what does that look like?
For that project, you mean, or generally speaking?
For DeckDeckGo, but I guess in general as well, yeah.
So generally speaking, all my previous application and all the application I built for my clients are with Ionic 4 and Angular. So that's the typical mobile application stack. And I guess that if Ionic goes to Ionic 6 and Angular 8 years, I'm most probably gonna still use that. And then for DeckDeckGo, I build. I use Ionic for all the UI components, like the buttons and I wrote the components for the slider itself, and for all these components I need for, I don't know, like for the remote controller, I need a web component who do like it pass the information between the apps and the deck. So I developed that with Stencil too.
Now, you touched on some of the stuff as shipping a presentation as a PWA, which I don't think I've seen a lot of presentations as the Progressive Web App, or at least I'll see a lot of people trying to go that route. It's a lot of people trying to make their site or their e-commerce or their kind of product the Progressive Web App part. Why did you want to make the presentation the PWA?
Yeah, so for my client, I use PWA. It's not easy to say when you speak French. So, and especially for all the development phase, because it's more easy to ship new features to my client. I just do them, I deploy them as a PWA, and then my client straight away could test it. I don't have to bring that in store, send a test flight, invite and stuff. And then when it goes to DeckDeckGo, I don't know, I like too the idea that you can have something everywhere. Even I was writing an article on Medium before the call, and I like the fact that you can be on your computer, you write your article, but then you're not finished, but you have to take the train, so you close the computer, and then in the train you open your phone and you continue to do that with the phone and so on. And I like that idea, and I saw that with the documentation somehow it should be the same. That why do you need, I don't know, a tool installed on your computer to see or to edit your presentation? And then PWA, the other advantages is that you can ship something with an offline support. I mean, that's really interesting that you can access something online, and then even if you don't have a network anymore, you can still access this presentation. So I really like it.
Yeah, completely agree on that front. There's so many major players, like I was tweeting out about Netflix yesterday, of that exact situation, that really nail and understand the benefits of going cross-platform, because it's so much more about just going beyond building a mobile app these days, right? Like we're getting spoiled in a good way with a lot of these like really forward-thinking leaders and service providers in the case of Netflix, when it comes to experiences that follow us as we go, right? Meaning through our commutes, through our work and home life and vacation and everything. So that and those use cases, as you said, I mean, there's watching video content like with them or YouTube, but as well as something like this where it's real work that you have to get done, or in this case, maybe building a presentation that you don't want to, you want to use your time wisely and not be restricted just because you're on a commute, let's say, so that's where that kind of, not only what a PWA kind of gets you, but also that offline capability that it's usually tied to is incredibly powerful. So you can keep editing, because is that something that's kind of built in, is you can edit I would imagine so. You can edit your DeckDeckGo deck presentation offline.
So yeah, right now you have to know HTML or Markdown to be able to edit your DeckDeckGo presentation, and you still need a computer to edit it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who knows in the future? I'm like, yeah, like I discuss with people, and if there is, I mean, it's just super fun to develop. So have absolutely for me, just like really fun to do it, to develop features. So why not one day developing something where you can edit it everywhere too? But yeah, about the PWA, what I like to is I discovered that use case that you can render a QR code in your presentation. And I like that idea that you do your talk, then at the end of your talk, you display a QR code, and that QR code is actually a link to your DeckDeckGo presentation you did publish before online, and then people just snap the QR code and get the PVR right away.
Versus like having people have to like, all right, take their phone out, take a picture of the URL, and then type that down. Why not just give them a QR code and have that automatically available?
Yeah, exactly. Or even saying to people, yeah, I'm gonna send you the link to the presentation tomorrow.
Yeah, and I've probably been guilty of this too, admittedly, with presentations. But how many times are we at a talk and the author throws up a URL that's just impossibly complicated or too long? You know, author.com/presentations/Ionic Zurich /this meetup /DeckDeckGo. You know, where it's just not. You know that if you really took a step back, folks aren't going to be able to remember that. Even if they take a picture of it, it's a lot more clunky than like a QR code. So yeah, that's a great feature. That's really cool.
Now we've talked about DeckDeckGo, we've talked about some PWA stuff. Let's talk about web components, because you have an interesting stack where you do Angular for like your apps, but this is built with built on top of Ionic and using web components more or less. Now, how has your experience been working with web components? Because we see a lot of people who are diehard fans of web components. Like they've drinking the Kool-Aid, they're all on board with web components. But then we see people who are rather stay with the frameworks and stay comfortable there. What's your experience? Because you've seen both sides.
Yeah, it depends. So I really love web components because I think it's just what I need to develop DeckDeckGo. It's just like the right match. Like if you want to build, let's say, your own graphical component or your own kind of library, it's really, yeah, it's kind of amazing to notice that when Ionic developed Stencil to write Ionic 4, I kind of have the feeling that you somehow opened a new way or a new paradigm, because if I wouldn't have had such a compiler to write my own web components, I'm not sure I would have wrote DeckDeckGo. So yeah, that's really cool. And yes, back to your question is, I think like for my clients right now, I still go with the framework way with Angular because yeah, let's say it's not my first rodeos, like I've built up with that stacks and it just go fast. So I could really, like I build my client, so I want to be the most effective as I could. And but
kind of comes down to like use the right tool for the job. And
yeah, it's just because right now I feel that sorry, maybe I should explain. It's just I feel right now that I'm more efficient to build a whole app if I use a framework. But I can exclude that in 1 year, when I got more experiences with web component, it will still be the case. It's just a question of effectiveness.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially with using Angular for larger, mid-sized to larger companies, is on that whole idea of picking the right tool for the job, right? Because I think I'd be curious, David, if you have the clients you're working with, for example, whether you're freelancing or consulting, you want to make sure that the tech you're using, when you finish that project or a phase of it, as we all know with software, it never ends. There's always something else to be done and new features and things. So I would imagine like picking the right tool for the job is important, because you want your clients, developers, and teams to be able to work with whatever that stack is. Choosing some maybe obscure language or something would kind of hinder that. You have to be cognizant to be a successful consultant for sure. But what do you think, David?
Yeah, I think you make a point. It's like, as a company, especially if you are like mid or big size company, you want to also be sure that you have the right team, or that you can hire the right person. And if you pick an obscure technology, then it's going to be a bit more difficult to find the right person for the job. And if you bet on well-known framework, then there are a lot of people out there who could do a great job for it. So that's a valuable point here.
And that kind of comes like, at least with my opinion on like certain things, like you see kind of like these purists who are wanting to do everything in either one framework, only that one framework ever, or only one approach to doing things because it's the hill that they've chosen to, die on. Where it's like, it doesn't have to be use Angular, use React, use Vue, use whatever framework, use web components. It doesn't have to be only those. You can explore all these different options because, like, the fact that we have all these options on the web is a really good thing, and we're able to do so much with it and pick the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, I think all these frameworks or no frameworks, they all have like advantages and a couple of disadvantages. So at the end, what does matter is that you build a great product, or a great solution. That what's really important. But no, I think like what's for sure the great assets of web component is that you can build your own kind of graphical library. I used to work for a couple of months for a big company, and they were building their own component, like their own buttons with the colors of the company, or the sidebar or menu bar with that color or that fonts and so on, or which behave like this or like that. But at the end, they did that with, I think, Angular. I don't remember the version. But then it means that all the product had to use the same technology too. And for a big company, for a big group, that could be problematic. And that's really that new paradigm with the web components, that you can build something which could be used everywhere across your company. That's really a huge step.
Yeah, and I think that's, super clear as we've talked to like countless, developers in their company, and it's like sometimes they just want a landing page, and like they don't need to bring in the whole setup for like a single page, like where it's just going to be like about.html, like going really, really old school, and they just want the components in there and just want to keep that consistent design aesthetic across their entire company. Like this is where web components shine.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I'd agree on that front. And with a lot of companies, of course, you're always going to have legacy projects, and so obtaining that consistent brand and design across will take time. But what we're seeing so far is, with any new type of projects or certain functionality, building them on web components, positions you for the future, because over time you can slowly replace, like for legacy apps, you can slowly replace certain portions of functionality in an application, and over time, if it makes sense for the business and your projects, like replace all of that or have them live side by side with existing the rest of your stack.
And beside that, there is also a cost question. I think that on the long term, you can, as a company, save cost if you use web components for some parts of your project. I used to work for another web company. We had like a Java stack where we were using, I think, prime traces. And then we were tight on schedule. So we were more focused on the product than focused on the technology. And then at some points, you reach a point where migrating to the newest version of framework just costs you a lot of money because you have to spend a lot of time to do it. And web components are like way more stable during the time, I think. So you will be able to save that money.
Yeah, that's a good point. You may be updating it or upgrading that component over time, but because the functionality is inherently self-contained, I think there's much less risk, is kind of what you're saying, right? Because versus upgrading an entire framework like
exactly.
Angular, React, whatever, there's going to be, that spreads across your entire application usually, because that's the one, one of those kind of heavyweights is what you've gone all in on. So that makes, I would agree with that.
And maybe it's maybe even possible that maybe you don't have to touch a web component because you encapsulate small functionalities in it, so they're just gonna remain stable for a long time.
Yeah, there's a really nice article or guideline basically on. It doesn't necessarily talk directly about web components, but it talks about component architecture or like architecture at scale for how to build a system. And it mentions like your components should be self-contained to the point like they only know what they need to know instead of having this giant monolithic component that contains all the functionality that you could possibly need. Like build it up. It's like a book Atomic Design by Brad Frost, where it goes in super deep into like how things should be scaled. And I think web components really fit that kind of point of this self-contained kind of piece of UI.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of good UI, I did have another question for you, David. I think I can't recall if I'm pulling this out of thin air or maybe because of, admittedly from, playing around with DeckDeckGo, but I was kind of curious. We have a lot of our Ionic fans out there are looking forward to hearing more info from, Mike and I and Ionic about, better desktop support for Ionic 4 UI components. And probably by the time this is published, we'll have some info about that. But I'm curious if you've had any experience with the web components and PWAs you've worked on with improved desktop support. So any like tips and tricks or things like that. Because I've noticed with just by nature of DeckDeckGo building presentations, that's typically going to be ran off of a laptop or something that's more of a desktop screen, right?
I think the best example I have, I've wrote a documentation for DeckDeckGo, and I basically, let's say it's really close to the Stencil website layout. It's really close, let's say like this. And I think it still need a bit of work when you want to have something which looks good on desktop and gonna look good on in the PVA. But it's not that much work anymore. It just I don't know if I got really good tips because I just cloned the website. So the good tips is to have a look at the Stencil website and do the thing. No, but,
well, that works too. That's why I knew. Yeah,
just copy what these people are doing. They know everything.
Yeah. No, yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I use the split plane. Of course, you need it to because as the screen is bigger, you need to contain a bit your content because it's not gonna otherwise gonna looks a bit weird.
Yeah, no one wants to be like trying to swipe out a menu coming in from like, oh, I'm on my desktop. Let me just slide over and drag out this menu real quick.
And when it comes to the router, I decided myself to use the Ionic Hooter for the app. So on the desktop, you got the Android kind of transition between the pages. So that's a bit different that if you use another router, I would guess, but it's also smooth, so it's all fine.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because like we know how to do mobile really, really well. and trying to get people on board with that. It's like, oh, we got to take in all these different kind of nuances when building for, say, a typical desktop environment or something bigger than like, your mobile device. Like when you even try to go to iPad or like a tablet landscape, it's completely different, and there's little quirks here and there to making sure things work well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always like, right now to build DeckDeckGo, I'm alone, so you want, again, there is that notion of effectiveness. You don't want to develop 20 times something, one time for desktop, one time for PWA, one time for whatever. You just want to develop something once for everywhere.
David, did you have anything that you want to give like a quick shout out to, or highlight before we sign off?
No, I don't know. I would say like
maybe the meetup.
Yeah, so the meetup. Yeah, tonight we got a meetup. So Fabio, one of member of the community, gonna show like a new proof of concept he's working on. I've got no idea what it's gonna be, but it's gonna be awesome. And then I'm gonna introduce web push notification with Firebase in an Ionic PWA, because I had to build that recently, so I'm just gonna display that.
Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
And just after this recording, I'm maybe gonna release a new features of DeckDeckGo.
So everyone knows when they go to hear this and they're like, when did this actually happen? Go to look at the release schedule from NPM. You'll see.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I built the fact that when you use the CLI to create a new project, you can straight with the CLI fetch some Google fonts, and it's gonna set up the Google fonts for you. Then you're gonna download it, and you're gonna add everything you need to have that in your PWA.
Oh, that's awesome. So. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, David. This has been a blast. Everyone, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Thank you for the invitation. Thanks.